to have a lav anitten tashlumim, either because you can pay back, that's in the case of gezel, or to have a lav shem b'masa. Somebody who says something about somebody else, the Gemara calls that lav shem b'masa, because dibur and masa are separated. Dibur and masa are different. You've actually got to do an action with the hand in order to be punished by the basin. Lav shem b'masa, ein malkin, I see, there's no malchus.
Avocado is under the dibur, but he gets einish.
He does a dibur b'peh.
Yes, that is quite true. I'm just restricting myself now to Lashon Hara, Rechilus, etc. Kalas Hashem with Adim is actually Misa. Yeah, Misa. That is true. So, but we're talking about, the Beinadam Chaveroi type, behavior. Yeah, behavior patterns. How people are, manners, courtesy, all this sort of thing. That there's no punishments for that at all. Talk Lashon Hara, I'm afraid one can get away with it in terms of, so Lav Shem B'masa, of course, Kalala, and there are other Aedus as well. There's giving false Aedus and blessing. There are other things, formal, ways of speaking, of course, carry punishment. But we're talking about normal behaviour among people. They do an Aveira, Benamach Aveira, Lashon Hara, Rechilus, and of course we include Gezel. There is no punishment for that. So he explains the following: Olam Zeh Dafka B'Yochid. This only applies. This rule that we are taken to task for Averis Masios, but we're not taken to task, there is no punishment for doing something which is against, good behaviour, like Lashon Hara. That is only applicable to an individual. So an individual can't be hauled into Beis Din for talking Lashon Hara. He can't. Avol im hat tzibur nishchosim, but if on the other hand, the tzibur are corrupt, bozeh motzil el hebrach, here we see the complete reverse of the attitude of the Rebbeinu Shloim to Tzibur. Because in Peah, it says the following: in Peah, Doira shel David kulam tzadikim hoyu. The Doya of David HaMelech's door, were kulam tzadikim, v'alidei shehuyu b'hem dilturim. But because they had people who were informers, they informed on one another, hoyu noiflim b'milchama. They had casualties in war. So the time of David, they were very good people. Kulam tzadikim, that means they kept all the mitzvahs. But because they were nichshel in Dilturim, the exact details of Dilturim I don't know, but it's doing something against somebody else by reporting on them or being malshalom in some way or other. But because they behaved like that, they were violating basic behavior patterns, nice behavior patterns among themselves. Are you noiflin b'milchama? On the other hand, Avol, Doirish, Achav, Oivda Avodah Zorah Hoyu. But in the days of Achav, which was a very wicked kingdom, they were Oivda Avodah Zorah. They actually openly worshipped Avodah Zorah. They went to war and they were victorious. They had no casualties. In fact, there were 40 years, I think Chazal say, that they fought wars, obviously not major wars, but major and minor wars. They won all these wars over a period of 40 years. It's amazing. They were always victorious. So you see that when the Rebbeinu Shloim is doing the judging on a tzibur, the scales are reversed. When it comes to Avodah Zorah, time of Achav L'Moshe, Avodah Zorah, the Rebbeinu Shloim is prepared to close an eye about Avodah Zorah. But what he won't close an eye to is Nimusim and Midos. When tzibur behaves in a nasty way, then Rebbeinu Shalom takes a very, very dim view of it and metes out his punishments. Perhaps I may add, he doesn't say this, it seems to me fairly clear from this whole approach and this whole mahalach that what was going on in Sodom. In Sodom, they were doing the most terrible things, of course, Avodah Zorah, Avada, but so was everybody else. Everyone was doing that. What was special about Sodom? It's the way they behaved to each other. The nasty behaviour they behaved to each other. The Nimusa and Midas were so fundamentally corrupt that they had to be destroyed in a very fundamental way. Whereas all the other countries around, nope, they behaved as they behaved. But Rebbeinu Shalom closes an eye to a tzibur that don't do the mitzvahs, but on the other hand, he takes very great exception to a tzibur who are corrupt in their Midas.
The pasuk by there shows it specifically by Sdom that they were bad in their Midas. The pasuk talks out what they did, that they wanted to
bring a riot.
To bring a riot, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
No,
it was Hashem. He just talks about it. The pasuk shows that they were bad in Midas. tells the stories.
All the stories are the same. A poor man came along and put him in stock, or they did give him stock and they took him back. In the most bestial way. It was horrible the way they behaved to each other. The whole concept of giving us chesed was a capital offence. You know, we don't need many riots for that. The way they killed Lot's daughter.
Yeah.
So could be that it's connected with what we are saying. Shimat Sibba Nishchosim Baveda Zora Va'aroyas Al Zenema about this when a Tzibur is committing sort of major crimes like Gileroyas, Shvichas Dom, etc. Al Zenema Hashoichen Itam B'Soik Timosam. The Baruch Shem still says, I will dwell among them, even though they are Tomei, they're doing Averas, but I'll still dwell among them. Avol Benimusim Umidus Lashon Hora Machloikas Al Zeh about that, when it's talking about the corruption of general behavior of a tzibur, then it's very, very different. Al Zeh Kosu Roima Ala Shemayim Kaviochel Salik Shchinoscha Mehem. It was Shalom, be above what they're doing, because the Rebbeinu Shalom will not tolerate their behavior. Ugedoyle Mizu Omru, there's a Gemara in Yuma which explains the following: Sheba Mikdash Rishoin, that in the first base of Mikdash, Hoyu Oibda Voidazora Aroyas Shvichazomim. We know the Gemara says this in Yuma, that the Avera of the people at this time was that they were committing the three cardinal sins, the greatest sins that we have, greatest Averas. And Mikdasheni Hoyu Oiskin Batoyer of Mitzvahs, they were good, in inverted commas, they were good. They were doing all sorts of nice things to each other. So we're doing the right thing on paper, but in the second base of Mikdash, they were practicing sinas chinam, they were suffering sinas chinam. And so the Gemara goes on to ask the following kasha: B'shom shalu mihem gedolim, who were greater? Was it the people that lived at the time of the first base of Mikdash, or was it the people that lived at the time of the second base of Mikdash? And the Gemara gives a teretz. Simple, the Gemara says. All you have to do is look at the Bira, the Beis HaMikdash. Because the people in the first Beis HaMikdash received another Beis HaMikdash just 70 years later. The Gezerah was mere 70 years, and they got another Beis HaMikdash. Whereas the people who were alive at the time of the second Beis HaMikdash, when that was destroyed, we are still waiting now for a third Beis HaMikdash to be built, Bimheira, B'Yameinu, and you can see from that obviously the Avera of the second was much worse than the Avera of the first. So we come again to the same principle, says the Meshech Chochmah. The principle being that in the first Beis HaMikdash there were over these terrible Averas, but they were good to each other. So the Rebbeinu Shalom dealt with them fairly leniently. They also had a destruction, and they also had to wait 70